Hey everyone, let's continue our discussion today about problem locations in your gardens. Today we're going to discuss gardening in wet or damp locations and how you can still create a beautiful garden in your yard even if you have a wet spot. So come garden with me and let's talk about gardening in wet locations. Gardening with wet locations in your yard can be frustrating, and I speak from experience. I have two rain gardens, one large and one small, and I just have other areas of my garden that just hold on to moisture. So if you're just looking to address those moisture-laden locations, or if you yourself want to create a rain garden, the plants that I've picked out today will be great for that. We have 4 shrubs, a grass, and 4 perennials, all of which I grow in my gardens, whether it's in the rain garden or just in other areas of my yard, and I've had success with all of them. Most of them are available from Proven Winners, so I'll show them to you on the Proven Winners website. The others are pretty popular and should be easily sourced either at a local garden center or on another website. So let's take a look at the plants that I have for you today. Okay, the first shrub that we're going to talk about today is the Sugar Shack button bush. This is a Cephalanthus occidentalis, and I give you that Latin name because there is more than one type of button bush. Sugar Shack just happens to be the one available by Proven Winners. As you can see by this website, it is a part sun to sun plant, so it's going to want a mostly sunny location. It is a 5x5. Now, I have had mine in my front rain garden for several years. And I say even with full sun and plenty of water, because my rain garden does get plenty of water, they've stayed about 3x3. They're prunable, so if they do get a little bit bigger, that's not a problem for you to go ahead and prune them. They are hardy in zone 4 through 10, so a really hardy shrub. This is the seed head, so this is what it looks like in the fall. So it also provides some fall interest. The interesting thing about the flowers is they almost look like a, I don't know, like a microbe. They're really, really cool looking, almost alien. Really pretty dark green, glossy foliage. Again, this is what they look like in the fall. Now, the great thing about button bushes is that they can actually grow with their roots in the water. In the wild, they often grow right in rivers, on the sides of rivers. Even if the river is at lower levels, the roots of these plants are still growing in water. So even if you have a location on your yard that, say, it floods in really heavy rains, but the rest of the time it's dry, these plants will still be fine. Not a problem. And again, these are available right on the Proven Winners website. I think they're becoming more and more available, though, in local garden centers. So definitely check these out in your local garden center. So the next shrub we're going to look at is Sweet Spire, or Itea virginica. Again, on the Proven Winners website, they do have several different varieties. They have the Scentlandia, they have the Fizzy Mizzy, and they have the Little Henry. I have Little Henry, and I have Scentlandia, and I'll talk about both of those. Let's talk about the Little Henry first, because this is the first one I planted, and this is a little bit smaller for people who maybe don't have a lot of space. So again, this is a 3x3, and I would say, now mine are in a mostly shady location. You can see that this is a really versatile plant. It can take full shade to full sun. Now, I will say in the shade, they just don't grow as big. They still flower. They're maybe not as thick as what this looks like right here. I suspect this plant growing here is in full sun, so just keep that in mind. But they do absolutely fine in full shade, and they kind of have these bottle brush flowers. These again can be put directly in the bottom of a rain garden. They will be able to handle that wet location and some inundation. Again, they're a 3x3, and they are hardy in zones 5 to 9. So another really versatile shrub. Again, so the Little Henry, it's called Little Henry because it's a little bit smaller if you don't have a lot of room for a bigger one. Not that any of these varieties get really, really big. Some of them are just a little bit bigger than others. So the Scentlandia is the other one that I have, and this one is in my yard, because it's growing in full sun, is a little bit bigger. But again, it has the bottle brush flowers. It again is full sun to full shade. Here it says 3x3. Mine are a little bit fuller. Now on, what's today's date? December 13th, I will say that mine are still beautiful red in their foliage, and they've held on to a lot of their foliage. I'm in zone 7A. I don't know if that's because of my zone. I don't know if that's because we've had slightly warmer than normal temperatures in the last few weeks. My little Henry, the one that's in more shade, has definitely already lost its leaves, although the foliage was still a pretty red color in the fall. But my Scentlandia has definitely held on to its foliage. And I will insert a picture of that so that you can see that even in mid-December, this sweet spire is still going strong with its fall foliage. I'll talk about the Fizzy Mizzy. I do not have any of these in my garden. Everything about this plant is the same. The only difference is that the habit is a little bit more upright. Instead of weeping like you saw with the Scentlandia and the little Henry, the bottle brush flowers on the Fizzy Mizzy kind of stand a little bit more upright and out. But everything else about this plant is the same. Still full shade to full sun, 3x3. I think the zones are the same, 5 to 9. Yeah, so all that is still the same. So if you don't want something that is a little bit more weepy, you can see kind of weepy. This is a weepy. I believe this one is, they don't have the best pictures here, but it's definitely a little bit more weepy. Kind of like, yeah, you really can't tell, but that's the difference between the Fizzy Mizzy and all of the other sweet spires. But again, these are great for wet locations or even a rain garden if that's what you think you want in your garden. So the next plant we're going to talk about are red twig dogwoods. Obviously, they have several different varieties on the Proven Winners website. I'm going to talk about Arctic Fire and Arctic Sun because those are the two that I grow in my garden. This pucker up one looks kind of neat, but they don't sell this one online, so I'm not sure how easy that's going to be to get. Looks like a pretty neat plant though. Looks like the leaves are puckered. But again, they don't sell that on the website. We did not sell that at the nursery that I worked at. And it does say right here that this variety is no longer available from Proven Winners, so not sure if you would be able to source that locally or not. So let's talk about the two that I grow on my property, Arctic Fire and Arctic Sun. So again, Arctic Fire and Arctic Sun, most dogwoods can take quite a bit of shade. Again, they will grow differently in shade than they grow in sun. In shade, you might not get as many flowers as you get in the sun, and the plant might have more of an open habit, and it might not get as big. Now, I will say for the Arctic Fire, 5x5 is wishful thinking. In my garden, they tend to get 7 feet tall, and at the base of the plant, they can be narrower, but at the top of the plant, if they're in a full sun location, they can get 5 to 6 feet wide. So these can be a sizable shrub, so just keep that in mind. You will need some space for an Arctic Fire. Even when we pruned them, they just came right back to the biggest growth that they were going to have. They never stayed on the small side, even when we pruned them. They do have the pretty red twigs in the fall. They will be redder if you prune on them. For us, every once in a while, we'll cut out a few of the older branches and they'll come back redder. This coming spring, I am going to try to coppice these, which means pretty much just cut them to the ground so that all of the red twigs in fall of 2024 will be red. I won't have any gray in there. The older twigs tend to be gray, so if you want to keep the red, you will need to prune on them. Again, they can take parts mostly shady to sun, and they are great for rain gardens or just other wet locations in your yard, or even just regular. I mean, if you want to red twig dogwood, you do not need a rain garden or a wet location. They will do absolutely fine, just planted in regular soil. Just make sure you give them plenty of water when they're establishing, and that goes for most plants anyway. In the first year or two, you'll have to provide extra water. Just for any wet tolerant plant, you want to make sure that if you are in a drought situation, and I don't necessarily mean a long-term drought, but even if you've gone weeks without rain, you're going to want to provide your plants with water anyway. But wet-tolerant plants, you're going to want to make sure they get some extra water in those drought locations or in those drought situations. So let's talk about the Arctic Sun now. So again, another dogwood. This can take mostly shady to full sun. the stems, instead of being red, or more like a corally, reddish, orange, yellow. It's like all, you can get coral, you can get red, you can get orange, you can get yellow. All 4 colors on this shrub. Really pretty. It's a little bit smaller, a 4x4. Mine have not yet gotten 4 feet tall. They might be 4 feet wide. To me, this one grows a little bit wider than it does tall, at least so far. I think I've had these for, I think 2023 is the 2nd full season, and they've definitely got wider than they've gotten tall. So that's something to keep in mind. I don't necessarily like plants that are wider than they are tall, but the stems are pretty. So to me, that's a sacrifice I'm willing to make. This is what it looks like in the snow. Just really pretty. This is definitely, I can attest to this, so you can kind of see how it's wider than it is tall. Almost like another plant that looks like it has a weeping habit. But again, great for moist, damp, wet locations. And even if those wet locations are in a little bit of shade, dogwoods are great for that kind of a situation. There is the Arctic Fire Yellow too. I don't grow this one, so I really can't speak to it. We grew it at the nursery that I worked at. And again, I feel like this is a bigger one, but it's, from my experience at the nursery with this shrub, it was another one that was going to be wider than it was going to be taller. And you can definitely see that here. It can get 6 feet wide, but 5 feet tall. Really pretty yellow stems. They all pretty much have these same kind of flowers. There's the yellow twigs. So I just wanted to bring that one up. I have not grown that one, so I don't have personal experience with it, but we did grow it at the nursery that I worked at. Really pretty yellow stems and great for wet locations. So the last shrub we're going to talk about are ilexes. And when I talk about ilexes for wet locations, because there are lots of ilexes out there, I'm talking about winterberry hollies and inkberry hollies. So let's talk about the winterberry hollies first, which a lot of you may already know based on your experience with Proven Winners. That is the berry poppins. I have 2 of these on my property. I would say half sun, half shade. At this time of the year, it's full shade. In the summer, it's like half and half, and they do absolutely fine. They might have a little bit more of an open habit. That does not, however, affect their berry production. They are covered in berries in the winter, so you kind of get 2 seasons of interest. You get the summer and the winter. With the foliage in the summer, the berries in the winter, but these can grow in a rain garden. Mine are just in soil that stays a little bit damp because it is a little bit shady. Really pretty though, gorgeous. They can take a little bit of flooding too. That's what's great about these winterberry hollies. Now, if you want berries, you will need a male pollinator. I have the berry poppins. I also have the berry heavy gold. I have berry heavy gold growing right in my large rain garden. So when that rain garden fills up, these plants can definitely take that kind of inundation. These are a bit bigger. You can see these can get 8x8, whereas the berry poppins I think was a 4x4. Let me see. This berry heavy gold is hardy in zones 3 through 9, so a really versatile shrub. These are going to want more sun than the dogwoods, however, so keep that in mind. These need to be in a mostly sunny location. Like I said, my berry poppins does get a little bit of shade in the summer, but I think in the summertime they appreciate that shade. Yeah, berry poppins is a 4x4. I can attest to that. Definitely a 4x4. Also is hardy in zones 3 through 9. I have the Mr. Poppins. That is the male pollinator that pollinates both my berry heavy gold and my berry poppins. So it's a 4x4, and you know, it's just green. It's not going to get berries, obviously, but the flowers on the male winterberry hollies in the spring will be a little bit bigger than the flowers on the female hollies. So there is also a berry heavy, which is red, which is another 8x8. Again, hardy in zones 3 through 9. I believe the Mr. Poppins will also pollinate the berry heavy. Now, I don't have any of these on my property, but I plan to. They are not going to be in technically a wet location, but again, these plants will do fine in just normal soil. You can see how the foliage starts to turn yellowish in the fall with the pretty red berries. Just a really, really pretty plant for 2 seasons of interest that can take some seasonal inundation, or just even if your soil you're going to plant these in just stays wet most of the time, these plants will be absolutely fine. So the other type of ilex that I want to talk about are the inkberry hollies. The ones that are the most popular at the moment because they are kind of like a boxwood alternative are the gem box and the strong box. I also have these growing on my property. So let's just take a look at the gem box. I've talked about these in other videos too, in my winter interest videos, I think. So these are these are Ilex glabra, smaller bush. These are evergreen. So they're going to provide you with winter interest as well as being able to take some damp locations. They're 3x3. They just came out with the pollinator for the gem box and the strong box, and I believe it's called squeeze box. I think it's called, yeah, squeeze box. So that's the male pollinator, and this one goes a little bit bigger. So if you want a more columnar habit for a holly on your property, that grows a lot bigger than the female hollies. But again, this will be the pollinator. Now these ilex, the inkberries, they're not going to get red berries like the winter berries. They're just going to get little blackberries. But again, these are beautiful boxwood alternative that can take damp to wet locations. They're evergreen and they do not have the diseases that the boxwoods have. And at this time of the year, they'll have little blackberries if you have that male pollinator. And I have several strong box and gem boxes growing on my property. In my rain garden, the top of the property, the big rain garden, and my dry creek bed at the bottom of the property, I have Ilex shamrock. They can get a little bit bigger than the gem box or the strong box, and they are evergreen. And I have them in those locations specifically for wet location tolerance and to provide some evergreen winter interest. So again, if you're looking for some evergreens that can handle wet locations, gem box, strong box, inkberry hollies in general can provide you with that interest. So let's talk next about grasses, and we're going to talk about panicums because these are what are mostly available on Proven Winners. The only one that's available here online that I grow is the totem pole, and this is a beautiful upright tall grass, and this one has a really strong structure. It's and it's blue. You can see that here. This is a beautiful switchgrass. This is a native grass. Now these are going to want full sun, otherwise they can flop and they will not reach their full size and they will not get to their full width and that beautiful structure. I think mine are getting a little bit too much shade, so they never quite get as full as they would if they were in full sun. But I have some panicum. It was available several years ago, I believe, on Proven Winners. I think it's called Heavy Metal. Yeah, I believe it's called Heavy Metal, and it is another really blue switchgrass. Now, it's not as tall as the totem pole. It's like a 4-foot tall. That is growing in the bottom of my top rain garden that gets, you know, in heavy rains and in long-term rains, or if we have tropical storms, that rain garden will fill up and those plants do just fine. They can take that seasonal inundation, but again, they are absolutely fine in just normal garden soil. But if you have a wet location, panicum grasses are perfect to plant. Everybody loves grasses. They sway in the wind. They're beautiful. Proven Winners has several different ones here. This one is called Apache Rose. It has pink flowers, or the seed heads that are grass flowers. They're really pretty pink. You can kind of see that a little bit here. This is about 4 feet tall, 2.5 feet wide. Just a really pretty grass. Let's see, most of these are zone 4 through 9, I believe. Let's take a look at this one. Yeah, 4 through 9. So again, really versatile. I think this is their latest one, Niagara Falls, which I think is absolutely beautiful. It's blue and it's weeping. I'm going to have to try to find some place in my yard for these. But again, another grass, if you have a wet location, maybe you have a bed that just stays wet after rains, any panicum grass is great for that. This one is even a little bit red. Now, I have one that is similar to Cheyenne Sky. It's called Ruby Ribbons. Maybe that was the precursor to the Cheyenne Sky. And again, I have that in a location in front of my bottom retaining wall that never seems to dry out if we have a wet year. So that's why I planted those grasses there. They're on the other side of a hardy hibiscus. So that tells you how wet that location can be. And these grasses just kill it. They love it. So let's see, what is next? Amsonia. So Proven Winners right now sells two different kinds of Amsonia. I have Storm Cloud. Let's talk a little bit about that one. I have this growing right in a rain garden, not quite in the bottom of the rain garden. This is my small rain garden up front, but kind of on the, it's not at the top of the berm, it's kind of like in the middle of the berm of the rain garden. So when that rain garden fills up, the roots of this plant, even up to like the middle of the plant, can be underwater, and again, it does just fine. It has these gorgeous, beautiful blue flowers in the spring. They are a really pretty standout. Again, just another great plant for a wet location, but again, can also just grow in normal garden soil. This one is about 2.5 feet tall by 3.5 feet wide. They are going to want mostly sun. I will say that about the Amsonia. These are not a shade plant, and again, very hardy, zone 4 through 9. String Theory is the newer Amsonia on the market just in the last few years. This has more of a feathery type foliage, almost ferny, but again, great for a rain garden, and has these pretty pale blue flowers in the spring. This one is a little bit shorter, 18 inches to 22 inches tall by 3 feet wide. So these are another plant that are wider than they are tall. I will try to insert a picture of what mine looks like now too, because I do have really pretty yellow foliage. I have not cut it back yet because it's such a sturdy plant. And it's still holding onto its leaves. So for me, not only does it perform well in the rain garden, it also gives me fall interest. So those are another great perennial if you have a wet spot in your yard. Now let's talk about cardinal flower. There is one cardinal flower that is available on Proven Winners, and this is called Starship Scarlet Bronze Leaf. Now the native species, the straight species of the cardinal flower, because this is a flower that is native to the U.S., at least the eastern U.S. Not sure if it's a native in the western part of the country, but you can find them growing every once in a while out by streams in the woods. I've spotted a couple around near where I live. You don't see a lot of them, but the straight species is green. I love a dark foliaged plant, and this one absolutely has that dark bronze foliage, which I think is beautiful with the red flowers. And these are great for hummingbirds. Hummingbirds seem to like red, and they are definitely attracted to the cardinal flowers. This one's a little bit shorter than the straight species. This is 22 to 28 inches and 16 inches by 22 inches wide. So, these are definitely a wet tolerant plant. I have mine in a little bit of shade, and they do just fine. I have the straight species. I do have one that is bronze leaf, but I'm not sure if it's this one. I feel like it gets too much shade, and I think I might have to rescue it this coming spring before I lose it. But again, part sun to sun. They're not typically growing in full sun in the wild, so I think they can take a little bit of shade, maybe just not as much shade as mine is getting. But again, they can tolerate seasonal flooding or temporary inundation. If you want to put it in the bottom of a rain garden, that's where I have mine. And they do absolutely fine. A little bit less hardy, zone 6 through 10. So more warmer zones, but still a great plant for a wet location. And again, great for hummingbirds. There are lots of different types of cardinal flowers, though. This just happens to be the one that is available on the Proven Winners website. Again, that's called Starship Scarlet Bronze Leaf. So the next flower I want to talk about that are great for rain gardens or wet spots, and I feel like this particular plant maybe needs more moisture than just normal garden soil. Most of mine, and we're going to talk about our irises, most of mine are in locations where the soil does stay a bit damp. I do have one growing near my mailbox, which is at the bottom of the property near the street. And I feel like that one, the only time that one gets really a lot of moisture is when it rains and we have, water running down the street from the rain. Maybe that holds on to a little bit more moisture, because I feel like irises don't like to dry out. And they also perhaps don't bloom as long as some of the other flowers. But because they can take such moist conditions, I feel like they warranted talking about. There are several different types of native irises. I'm going to talk mostly about Iris versicolor because that is what I have growing in my rain gardens. Although I do have Siberian irises, I just prefer native plants, but any iris would be great for a rain garden. So let's talk about Iris versicolor. It's a really pretty blue, and again, can take a lot of moisture. So you can see what a pretty flower that is. I have several growing in my front rain garden. I have 4 of them growing on my top rain garden on the berm. The soil stays moist up there, so that's why I can grow them up there. These are clump forming perennials, and the clumps can be divided every few years because they do get bigger. I've only had mine in the ground, I want to say I planted them mid to late summer 2022, I think, and I feel like already this year in 2023 the clumps are bigger than I would like them, and they could be divided. So that's just something to keep in mind. They are a zone 3 through 9. The Iris versicolors are a 2 by 2.5. Some of the other irises can get a little bit bigger than that. I feel like some irises I have growing in my yard, like I said, the ones at the bottom of my driveway are Siberian iris. I'm going to say they probably get about 3 feet tall. I have other irises growing in my front rain garden that have variegated foliage. Those are probably about 2.5 feet tall. Most of them are purple because I'm a sucker for a purple flower. But again, these can grow in wet soil. They're deer tolerant. Definitely can attest to that. I feel like, I don't know if I mentioned this, I think they can take, especially the native irises, I'm not sure about the Siberian irises, but the native irises can take a little bit of shade. I wouldn't say full shade, but if you have a location in your garden that stays damp and gets maybe a little bit of afternoon shade, I feel like that would be fine. So again, irises, and they can actually grow in water. So if you have a spot in your garden that's really, really wet, irises are definitely going to be able to take that kind of situation. And again, they come in all shapes and sizes, not just blue. There are so many different kinds of irises, so many different colors. The blue, because I feel like there's some really pretty, almost like copper. I just feel like those ones are really, really pretty. Don't know if I'm going to be able to find any real quick here. Yeah, so here's one. This is called a copper iris. This one is on American Meadows. It's new apparently, but I've seen different ones of this color before, and I think that's just so unique. Again, great to grow in a water garden. This says, this resilient wildflower thrives in clay soils and can tolerate 6 inches of standing water as well as short periods of drought. So really versatile irises. So the last thing we're going to talk about today are turtle heads, or Chelone. I think these are absolutely charming plants. Again, there's several different varieties. I believe the straight species is just a white flower. Pretty. I happen to like the pink. I have one called Hot Lips, and it is just charming to me. The beautiful pink flowers with the deep green, almost leathery foliage. I just think that's really, really pretty. I have, I think 4 or 5 of these growing in and amongst those irises up in my top rain garden. These are a later flowering plant though, whereas the irises bloom in, I would say, May. The Hot Lips Chelone, I think all Chelone are a later bloomer, so say late summer. The pretty pink flowers. Let's see if we can find some information on these. So these are a zone 3 through 8. So again, really, really hardy, 2 feet tall, 2 to 4 feet tall, 1 to 2 feet wide. They are bright pink flowers, prefers moist and can tolerate wet soil, water frequently, do not let dry out. I don't provide mine with any extra moisture, not now that they're established, especially in wet years. Now we have had, the last couple of years, we have been below normal precipitation, so I guess these can do well. And like I said, once I planted them, I watered them for the first year. This year I did not go up there and water them extra. They still bloomed, they're still spreading, so these are absolutely fine. So those are plants that you can plant if you have wet locations in your garden, if you want a rain garden. You know, it's not beyond the realms of possibility to have a beautiful garden, even if you have wet spots in your yard. I hope you learned something from this video. I hope you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, please let me know. Consider subscribing to my channel so I can continue to bring you some information, and give the video a thumbs up. And I'll see you in the next one. Bye.